Okay, thank you, councillors. We'll move on to. I just want to make sure Councillor Wilder's online. Is he? He's there? Excellent, thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, sorry, I am online now.
Excellent, thank you. Welcome, Councillor. I just want to make sure you heard us and what was going on there. The next report is CPE 24.035, which is a post-exhibition report, the planning proposal Wentworth Avenue, East Lakes. You can have a officer summary on that, please.
Lovely, thank you. I try not to disappoint. Okay, councillors, this matter is a planning proposal. It's in its final stages of preparation. Just for those councillors who might not be familiar, a planning proposal is essentially a proposal to amend our local environmental plan, which is the Bayside Local Environmental Plan 2021, often referred to as an LEP. I'll sort of try and introduce the acronyms slowly because there's lots of them. That's what this proposal is for, and I'll explain exactly what the intention of it is in a moment. But first, in terms of location, you can see the yellow box on the screen there. This is the bridge that goes over Wentworth Avenue that links both sides of the Lakes Golf Course. You'd be familiar driving underneath it. It has advertising signs on it, one on each side, digital billboards. This is what it looks like. So the road is actually owned by council. The bridge is built and maintained by the golf club, and council receives a share of the income from the advertising. So the sign was originally approved by the Land and Environment Court in 2006 for a limited period of time. Back at that time, the LEP of the day had signage as a permissible use. That means that it's something that you can apply for through a development application, or a DA, another acronym, and it can be considered. If an LEP doesn't have a use as being permissible, the contrary is it's prohibited, and that means that that use cannot be approved. So at the time it was approved, it was permissible. Since that time, 2006, the LEP has changed a couple of times. So the former Botany Bay LEP 2013 prohibited signs in that zone. So at that point in time, it became prohibited. And that was carried forward when the 2021 consolidating LEP was done. So because that approval had a lapse date on it, and it's now not permitted under the current LEP, a DA can't be approved to continue that signage. So what council has resolved to do, and we're at the end of the process of, is to amend the LEP to allow signage in this particular location. And that's done by including in the LEP what's referred to as an additional permitted use, or an APU. So essentially there's a schedule in the back of the LEP that identifies particular sites where things can be approved that are not normally allowed in that zone. So rather than making signage permitted everywhere in this particular zone, it's just limited to this individual site. So that's the proposal. Alongside of that, we do have a development application sitting with us that's waiting for this planning proposal to be determined. And if it does go through, then we can approve that DA and the signs will be regularised. Essentially, this is just to regularise what is there. There's no change in the DA that's proposed in terms of the size or anything of the signs. They will just stay exactly as they are today. Another piece of planning terminology. So when council decides that it would like to amend its LEP through a planning proposal, we then need to send it into the Department of Planning, and they do what they call a gateway review. So a gateway is essentially them checking that it's consistent with state policy and giving council the okay to go to community consultation. So that happened back in June this year. And so the proposal did go out to the public exhibition in July and August this year. We received 43 submissions that were all in support. They were primarily from members of the golf club who wanted to stay and stay. We did consult with Transport for New South Wales just to see that they had no concerns in terms of vehicle safety, the brightness of the light, all those kinds of things, and they raised no objection to it. So the final steps in the planning proposal process are, if council is happy to finalise the proposal, it then goes back to the Department of Planning, and they will bring it into effect by amending our plan and publishing a notice in the Government Gazette. If that happens, then the DA that we have on hand at the moment can be finalised, and it's all regularised and the signs remain as they are. And that's essentially it.
Thank you very much. Have a mover, Councillor Curry. Seconder, Councillor Barlow. Any discussion? Douglas?
It's the first night.
Try.
Thank you. Thank you. Just wondered, in terms of who actually makes an income from the signage, is that Transport for New South Wales rather than council? Is it council?
No, through your chair, the roadway is actually owned by council, so the income is split between the golf club and council.
And how much is the income through the chair?
I have to take that on notice. I don't know the exact amount.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay. Any further questions? Just from me, there was some issues in the past in relation to the payment of rent under the terms of the lease. I know there was complications in relation to the DA, etc. So can you just give us a status update on where that sits, please?
Yes, sure, Chair. So there is an agreement in place now, and council has continued to receive revenue from the sign, even though it's sort of technically not approved at the moment. So there were some legal proceedings that took place around those issues and payment and what was due and so on, and that's been settled for the time being. I will need to check with our in-house lawyer just to see whether, once this is all done and the DA's approved, whether we need to revisit that again, or whether what was put in place just continues forward. But for the time being, those matters are all resolved.
Thank you. And then, assuming this goes ahead and we there's an agreed additional permitted usage, does that then trigger a renegotiation of a licence over that site?
I think that will need to be revisited. I'm just not sure whether what is in place now continues regardless of this, or whether it needs to be revisited. But yeah, we will certainly attend to that.
All right. Well, if you could perhaps just respond through the council portal on those two issues, that'd be great. Thank you very much. So, councillors, we have a recommendation in front of us that the council notes the submissions received, and we forward the LEP amendment to the Department of Planning. All those in favour say aye. Against, no. I'll declare that carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is CPE 24.036, Generic Crown Land Plan of Management. We can have an officer summary, please.
Yep. All right, just some background. The Crown Land Management Act was amended in 2016 and consolidated 8 pieces of legislation into one, and that introduced a range of reforms that were aimed to streamline the management of Crown land. So one of the requirements on council was that we had to have a plan of management in place over all the parcels of land that were Crown land that council was given the management of and use of. These include things like having the use specified, whether it's for community or conservation or recreation, the intended purpose of the land, objectives around performance standards and how the land would be managed. It had to be prepared in consultation with the community, and it provides a framework for tenure going forward in terms of leasing and licensing and the like. Council has, there's 25 Crown land parcels that are covered by this generic plan. We do have a number of other parcels of land, Crown land, that have their own plan of management, including Lady Robinson Beach, for example, or Cook Park. So this one covers a range of them. They're all listed out and mapped in the draft plan that's attached to the report. So along the way, there were some milestones that had to be met. The first one was to identify the purpose, as I mentioned, whether it's a park or for recreation, for what purpose. And council did that back in 2020, which was the time frame required. The first generic plan was submitted to the Crown Lands in February 2021. They took some time to review that and eventually gave feedback on that one and endorsement to proceed. That plan was then exhibited in May 2023. The feedback from that exhibition went to Council in December 2023 via a report, and there were some minor amendments suggested at that point in time. The plan was then sent back to the Minister, whose consent Council requires before it adopts the final version of the plan, and that was received in September this year. So the last step in this is for Council to adopt the final plan, and then it will be in place. The benefits of having the plan in place and finalised is that it makes it easier for us to manage in terms of dealing with community groups and leases and licences, because all of the uses and all the various management strategies are all set out in the plan. So the documents attached to the report looks like that, and you can see there's some tables in there and there's some maps that show you each parcel of land and all those purposes and objectives and so on that I've mentioned in there. So this one is also at the very final stage. It's been given the tick from the Minister to be adopted, and if Council's happy to proceed with it, that's the end of the process.
Excellent, thank you. Can I have a mover? Councillor Kassim, second to Councillor Douglas. Is there any questions, discussion? Councillor Douglas?
I have a few questions. I just took some notes. So page 45, which talks about the different permitted uses of the park and the sports ground, I noticed that there was nothing in there around skate parks or pump tracks. And I just wondered if that's an omission or if they fall under one of the other subcategories that are listed.
Through you, Chair, there are definitions for those various use categories. I'd have to check them to see exactly, but we would have looked through that and made sure that they fitted into the most relevant one. They may fall under sports ground. I'm not.
Yeah,
have to look at the definitions.
Wasn't clear to me which one they would fall under, so it might be worth.
Yeah, active and passive recreation. But yeah, they are all defined in the legislation.
Okay, thank you. I have another question through the chair. Page 49. If I just find page 49. The reserve number 62644 Barton Park, DeCourcy, from the 1st of January to 2021 to the 1st of February 2021, golf driving range currently in holdover. What does that mean, currently in holdover?
That refers to the lease that we have with the operator of the golf driving range. So that lease has expired, and holdover just means that it's continuing on, but it's there's a provision in leases often that when they expire, they can just carry on until something new is put in place. So that's a piece of work that we will look at in the next 6 months to go out to the market with that lease.
Thank you. A question on page 50, noting that I might not already know the answer to this, but I just wanted to check. So reserve number 62644, the Barton Park Riverine Park, the Arncliffe Aurora Football Club, proposed initial works licence followed by a proposed term of up to 21 years, is quite significantly different to the one for 62644 Barton Park St George Football Club, proposed term up to 5 years. I just wondered if the officer could explain why there's such a differentiation between the different leases.
Yep, certainly through your chair. The Aurora lease contemplates them or requires them to spend a lot of money to invest in the existing building. They've received some grants, and the club's putting in a lot of its own funds as well. And when that's the case, the club will often want a longer period so that it's guaranteed to enjoy the benefit of what it puts in. Barton, on the other hand, was handed over as a brand new completed facility and with nothing needing to be done or spent on it. So for those longer leases, you do need to get the approval of the Minister or the Minister's delegate and the Office of Local Government. And so we've been through that process with Aurora, and that approval's been given.
Thank you. That was what I thought might be the case in terms of the financial investment, but just wanted to check. Just a couple more quick questions through the chair. Page 55, Scarborough Park, the map on the left-hand side, 500421. Just noting there's like quite a big area around the baseball courts that's excised from the Crown land. I just wondered, and it's the same in page 58, Barton Park, where it sort of covers the large part of the area, but not the whole part. And I was just wondering why that is.
Through you, Chair, I can check. I suspect the reason is that it's not Crown land. It may be owned by council or somebody else, most likely by council, so it doesn't need to be covered by the plan.
Okay.
But I can check that before the council meeting.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Barber, from me, how does this complement or conflict with individual plans of management for particular sites? Because generic is great and provides consistency, but interested to know how then council from now and into the future manages individual.
Chair, the other plans do need to be reviewed. They generally have a time frame for review, and a number of them are up for review again. They tend to be on open spaces where Sir Joseph Banks is another example. Where there's kind of unique things going on, and they're more of a regional facility, and so they capture more detail in terms of what is on the site and what happened on the site in the future. So that's why they're generally picked out to have their own tailored plan of management. A lot of these ones are sort of more open areas or playing fields where similar kind of objectives exist for them. So that's primarily the difference. But council can review them at any time, and they are meant to be periodically updated.
Is there, you can take this on notice, but maybe in the next meeting, just give us just a summary of what plans of management are in place, just for noting, just to raise awareness of that. You mentioned Sir Joseph Banks Park, for example, and I know through my inquiries in the last term, there was some that were sort of ageing and no one was sort of in no man's land. So maybe if I can suggest a report, just come to this committee, the name, the location and the plan of management, and the review, the last review date would be great. Thank you. Councillor Curry.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just ask, so as an example, we've got a plan of management being undertaken for Astrolabe as an example. So that process, how does that then work or feed within this process?
Yeah.
Master plans.
Yeah, that's a master plan process, which is not doesn't really have a statutory kind of framework. It's just something the council does as a vehicle to make decisions about what it would like to see in those parks in the sort of short, medium, and long term, and to consult the community. The outcome of that would be captured in the plan of management. If the purpose changes, if we decide that we want to add more sporting in there or change the uses there or the management strategy, then that would have to be reflected in the plan of management before we can do it. For example, we can't approve DAs for things that are not consistent with the plan of management. So it's kind of the statutory framework. The master plans are just more of a council exercise, I guess, to help decide what we do in these areas.
Thank you. Any more discussion? Now we've got a recommendation in front of us, which is to the Crown Land Plan of Management consented by the Minister be formally adopted by Council. All those in favour say aye. Against, no. I'll declare that carried. Thank you. Councillors, we have now moving on to one confidential report before us. So I'll move that we close the meeting to the public for the reasons outlined in the report. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Douglas. All those in favour of moving to confidential say aye. No, I'll declare that carried. Thank you. be back on. Excellent, thank you. So, Jim, do you want me to read that, or you read out the?
Chair, I think if you just note that it is as published.
Okay. So in the closed session, it was endorsed as published in the business paper. The 4 recommendations of council that was carried unanimously, and there be no further business. Close the meeting at 7:20 p.m. Thank you.
We off? We off?
I'll have to read the code.
Okay, thank you. Welcome councillors, members of the public and staff. I declare the meeting open at 7:25 p.m. Everyone at this meeting is reminded to conduct themselves in a polite and professional manner, keeping communication factual, using appropriate language and tone. Do not use any defamatory or derogatory remarks. Defamation laws apply to addresses in public forum. I also ask councillors to observe the requirements under the Code of Meeting Practice and Meeting Etiquette. I remind all present that the video recording is an official record of council and may be made available to persons upon request in accordance with the Government Information Public Access Act 2009. No other recordings are permitted. Bayside Council acknowledges the traditional custodians, the Gadigal and Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, and pays respect to elders past, present and emerging. The people of the Eora Nation, their spirits, ancestors, will always remain with our waterways and the land, our Mother Earth. So apologies and attendance by audio-visual link. We have an apology from Councillor Poulos. There are no other further apologies or councillors seeking leave of absence. As we have Councillor Poulos wishing to participate in this meeting via audio-visual link, may I have a motion? Would someone like to move and second that the council request to attend by audio-visual link? Moved by Councillor Curry, seconded by Councillor Barlow. She's an apology, is she? Okay, sorry, apology. Can we just move in that one again? No. Moved by Councillor Curry, seconded by Councillor Barlow. Disclosures of interest. Does any councillor wish to make any disclosure of interest? No disclosure.
Disclosure here. Apologies, I didn't send this earlier, but I've got an insignificant non-pecuniary interest in CWA 24.039 Sir Joseph Banks Park Amenities because I live in that neighbourhood. And although it's insignificant, I will leave the chamber for consideration and voting on that matter.
I would like to declare non-significant non-pecuniary interest in, non-significant non-pecuniary interest in CWA 24.037. Oh no, sorry, wrong number. The one under it, 0.038 Wentworth Avenue and Page Street shared path, because I live within that vicinity, but the path has no impact on me, and I'm going to stay in the chamber and debate the matter.
Any other councillors?
Yeah, I'm making that not significant interest in.
You need to put
Microphone.
microphone.
Oh, sorry. Let's have the clear, making funny noises. The clear bit.
Oh dear, okay, no phone noise, that's good. So that's CWA 2437, just because I, as a supporter of community sport, I have indicated that I'm going to be wishing to look into all possibilities of having all-weather sporting fields for clubs in the area, in St George.
And will you be staying in the chamber?
Yeah, I'll stay in the chamber.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask two councillors who were present at the meeting, the previous meeting, to move and second the confirmation of the minutes?
Councillor Barlow and I were there, so I'm happy to second.
Councillor Barlow and seconded by Councillor Morrissey.
Curry.
Oh, sorry, Morrissey. Sorry, Curry. Okay, let's move on then to the reports. So the first report we have is item 4.1. Could we please have the officer's recommendation before us?
Move that way.
The mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Curry and Councillor Morrissey. So the first motion, Morrissey, I said. Sorry. We're firstly going to do an election for the chair and deputy chair role. I'd like to put my hand up for the chair role.
Yep.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye. Aye.
I declare that carried. Thank you. So we have Councillor Douglas as the chair and Councillor Barlow as the deputy chairperson. So we'll move on to the first item, which is CWA 24.034, Lady Robinson's Beach Foreshore Management Plan update. Could we have a mover and a seconder for that item? Or would you like to have the briefing first? Could we have the officers briefing first, please?
Through the chair, I'll just pull up a short presentation. Sorry. Okay, so this report talks to three different items. It's the finalisation of the strategy for the Lady Robinson Beach Foreshore Management Plan, and then it looks at concepts for two precincts within that plan, being at Brighton Le Sands and at Sandringham Baths. So starting with the Lady Robinson's Beach foreshore strategy, Lady Robinson's Beach is basically the whole 7 kilometres on the western shoreline in Botany Bay, shown in the red rectangle on the map on the right there. So this strategy, councillors have been involved throughout the development of this strategy. Was last discussed at a briefing session back in March, just before we went out to community consultation on the strategy. There's been no substantial changes following that community consultation. It was very positively received by the community. So the key objectives of the plan are to improved and sustainable coastal hazard protection, enhanced foreshore amenity integrated with existing public spaces and amenities, maintaining existing swimming enclosures with opportunities for improvements, a more resilient sandy beach area where practicable and feasible, and supporting healthy foreshore ecology and intertidal environments. Just a quick rehash on the strategy. So whereas previously every management approach that's been developed and looked at has aimed to maintain 7 kilometres of sandy foreshore, the targeted amenity approach that we've landed on aims to work with the existing coastal processes and accept that there are areas of continual erosion, and those are only going to continue with the impacts of climate change and sea level rise. So based on that, we've split the foreshore up into 3 different zones. We've got Zone A, which we're calling resilient, which is essentially areas of sandy beach where the sand is not eroding, it's relatively stable, or it's accumulating, and that's accounting for just over half of the shoreline. In Zone B, we've identified areas that are prone to erosion, but the sandy foreshore is highly valued by members of the public and the community in general. So they're the areas where we aim to restore and maintain a sandy beach, and maybe implement measures to reduce some of the erosion that's occurring in those areas. And then the third zone are areas that are unstable and are eroding, and they require some kind of intervention to protect the coastal environment through environmentally friendly seawall designs, and that accounts for about 30% of the shoreline. So looking at the resilient zones, which accounts for the majority of the foreshore, just over 54%, you've got the 4 areas shown there on the map. The largest of those starts right up in the north at the Cooks River and includes all of the beach at Kiama, extending all the way down to the end of the swimming enclosure at Brighton Le Sands. That's an area where the sand does tend to accumulate. It moves to the north up there, and it's also an area where we've recently sourced a whole lot of sand to protect an area down near President Avenue. So key initiatives in those resilient zones include maintaining healthy foredunes where they exist, maintaining and improving beach access and the netted swimming areas, and also looking for opportunities for upgrades to equitable access. We can also monitor those areas where the sand builds up and potentially use them as source sites where required for renourishment in some of the other areas, which might include some of these areas in Zone B. So there's essentially two areas in Zone B where there is a high value placed on that sandy amenity provided, in particular at Ramsgate Beach. But those areas are prone to erosion. So the initiatives such as periodic sand nourishment, but also looking at what kind of upgrades we can do to the existing rock groins or other initiatives that might improve the sand retention and reduce the need to continually go back in and top up the sand in those areas. And then the last zone, which is zone C, are the areas that are pretty much unstable and they're eroded shorelines with limited beach access. Many of them have no sandy beach and have not had for some time, and are protected by a variety of formal and informal seawalls. Some of them date back into the 1930s, and we're looking at basically improving that foreshore protection while also looking to obtain some ecological outcomes and protect the infrastructure that's behind those areas. Just quickly, coming out of the plan, there is a whole lot of key management actions. A lot of those ones that are rated high priority are already in progress. For instance, design of the engineered coastal protection works between Solander and the Brighton Le Sands seawall. We'll get to that concept later. Interim sand nourishment works to improve the sand buffer around the President Avenue vicinity, periodic sand nourishment in the Ramsgate area. There are works that are well underway at the moment. This is the recently completed re-nourishment works that we were undertaking at Ramsgate Beach. On the left there, not too long ago, that's the beach that didn't exist, and as of last week, there is a nice sandy amenity that's been reinstated in that area. At Brighton Le Sands, it's not so much about providing the sandy amenity, it's more about providing some coastal protection to allow us time to progress the concept works there. We've been sourcing sand up from the Koima area, as I mentioned, and that's sort of the progress photos of where we're at on that particular project. As I said earlier, there's been extensive community consultation related to this overall strategy involving the 3 different zones in our management plan for the next 50-year design period. We had an information day at Ramsgate Lifesaving Club back in April. We had a Have Your Say page up, which had about 1,200 views, and then we also had 47 responses from our online survey. Not a single person unsupporting of the plan, nothing negative. We had a few suggestions and some feedback that was incorporated. People wanted to improve beach accessibility and the swimming enclosures, and while supporting the environment and maintaining the pedestrian foreshore pathways, but very well received from all the avenues. We've also been engaging closely with a lot of the state agencies and other key stakeholders that are impacted by this approach and have had an impact on Botany Bay and the situation that we're in at the moment. So yeah, we've got key stakeholder working groups set up, and everyone's in support of the plan as it's been presented so far. So that wraps up the foreshore management plan. The recommendation is that we sort of formally adopt that plan and then publish it for the public. Falling out of that plan are concept designs for 2 of the high priority precincts within the plan. The highest priority precinct being at Brighton Le Sands, extending south down to Monterey. This particular area here, the beach has receded 50 metres since the groins were constructed back in 2005, and the scarp lines now, or before we just did some of those temporary protection measures, the scarp line was within about 11 metres of the Grand Parade, and in danger of impacting that state infrastructure behind there. As you can see down the bottom of the slide, heavily eroded foreshore, damaged infrastructure, some ad hoc rocks and dune hazards, and a minimal beach there at the moment. So this concept aims to address those issues. As I mentioned, it extends basically from the bathing area at Brighton Le Sands, or at the end of the boardwalk essentially, at Brighton Le Sands, right through to the groin at the southern end at Monterey. So some of the key enhancements proposed along that route, from the boardwalk to the south of the Millennium Centre. It's basically adaptation of the eroded foreshore with new environmentally friendly engineered seawalls with a promenade to provide long-term coastal hazard protection for the adjacent land and the Grand Parade, and an upgrade of the public space between the road and the foreshore, including new waterfront promenade, viewing platforms, an intertidal corridor connecting Monterey with Brighton Le Sands beach access. In terms of costs, because the concept's so preliminary, we've been given a wide range for what its implementation might cost, because a lot of it depends on the detail that's yet to be designed. But the midpoint for the range that we've currently got is 50 million, and the bulk of that cost is wrapped up in the seawalls, which probably account for about 30 million. And that's where we'd be looking for grant and agency and state contribution, because some of the factors that contribute to the issues that we face, obviously the airport expansion and the expansion of Port Botany and the changes that occurred from those developments within the bay. So quickly looking at some of the key highlights of the concept. We've got the proposed seawall and the boardwalk extension, which aims to safeguard the public space and parkland adjacent to the foreshore and widen the usable foreshore, to remove the public space pinch points and hazards and barriers to improve access and equity, and also improve safety for the active transport users. So the engineered vertical seawall would be basically a buried secant piled structure with an upper capping at the northern end, and as we move south, that would become an exposed rock revetment type structure. At the President Avenue Gateway, the highlight of this area is the lookout structure, which would look out to the heads and provide us spectacular sunrise shots. The structure's got dual purposes of reinforcing one of the most heavily eroded sections of the beach and also acting as an energy dissipator for the wave energy that causes the erosion at that point. And then also by reclaiming some of that 50 metres of foreshore that has eroded over the last 20 years, it removes some of those pinch points and creates a much more usable space. Yeah, the rock revetment seawall that's proposed would include some intertidal zones and nature-based adaptations along the intertidal area there, and also allow for relocation of the walking path along the foreshore edge, and amenity improvements in the form of seating and and things of that nature. Coming to the southern end of the precinct, the area near the groin would provide opportunities to create some, again, really interesting intertidal areas and rock pools that are accessible to the public, and there's also the possibility of providing access out across that groin. And of course, looking at the practicalities as well, there's the parking, and this is just a concept that demonstrates one of the options where we could gain an extra 18 car spaces, but also move the car park back towards the Grand Parade and open up that area along the foreshore for the public's use. So that's the high-level concept that we've got for precinct number 2 at Brighton Le Sands. And we'll move on to precinct 9, which is the foreshore area from Primrose Avenue to Russell Avenue and includes the Sandringham seawall and baths. It's an area also prone to erosion, and the 260-metre length of the seawall between Primrose Avenue and Vanstone Parade has recently been reinforced with a rock revetment to protect the toe of that seawall as part of the cycleway upgrade that was recently done there. That protection hasn't as yet been extended into the bath area because it would impact access into the swimming area. So that seawall's currently protected with this sand pillows that you can see in the left-hand image there. And we've looked at another number of different concepts, and I think the recommended option is that we do continue the rock revetment out past that seawall and then create an elevated or suspended boardwalk over that structure to give the public access into and out of the swimming bath area. So the recommendation is that we present these concepts to the community, and then any feedback that we receive through that consultation can be fed into the detailed design that'll be proposed for the 2025-26 program of works for this particular site. Yeah, and as mentioned in the report, the next steps, if endorsed by council, would be to publish the foreshore management plan for Lady Robinson's Beach, also publicise those two concepts and start seeking community feedback to further develop the designs for both those areas. We're also currently looking at options to better retain the sand at Ramsgate Beach, where we recently relocated that 21,000 cubic metres of sand. Whether there's adaptations or changes to the groins or offshore breakwaters that could better retain the sand. We'll look to determine the best course of action there, and then we're also on the lookout for some grant and funding opportunities to make this all happen.
Thank you. That was a very thorough presentation. Do we have a mover and a seconder for that item?
Second.
Councillor Morrissey and Councillor Kassim. Is there any discussion?
I just had a
Councillor
question. Only because I wasn't involved in some of the earlier, obviously long-term consideration of this. With regard to the point 4, obviously we need to get funding from other people, especially where they've aggravated the problem. I'm wondering what investigation has been made in the past about other things they could do, as in if it was the third runway or whatever, like if it was runways or ports or whatever. We're trying to abate the problem. We're trying to remediate and abate the problem at our end. But is there anything that can be done at their end, if that makes sense? I mean, if the waves were, if wave action was altered because of the way they did things, can they do anything? Can they build out a groin or something? Can they do something elsewhere in the bay to affect the wave patterns so that the damage doesn't keep happening? Because this is obviously just going to keep happening.
Through the chair, a lot of the changes to the bay have already occurred. I'd say it's almost like the horse has already bolted. So there's extensive land reclamation, and as part of that land reclamation, there's extensive dredging. So there's some massive dredge holes that have been created to reclaim land for the port and continue to be created for the port expansion that's ongoing at the moment. And those dredge holes act as a sink for the sediment as it travels through the bay. So I guess the short answer is no, it's not easy. The extensive urbanisation's already occurred to try to reverse it, to try to reverse those wave patterns that it's caused. Is not a simple exercise.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I'm not expecting, I'm just thinking, is there any way to actually solve the problem rather than just remediate it? But no, is the answer. Okay. Which someone else would pay for, because it's their fault.
Through the chair, that's actually part of the point of the presentation. A lot of the work that's been done over many years to get to this point will allow us now to apply for grants, and particularly to go to the state and federal government to look for a substantial contribution. This is much bigger than local council. It's much bigger than Bayside to solve this issue in creating an international airport and, a port for the whole of the state. We need to have that very substantial contribution. And this is just the first level of detailed planning that will be done on the priority areas. But, it's not something council can go alone with.
Totally. Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? I have a few items. Just wanted to reiterate what the General Manager said as well. I was there on Sunday passing back on my bicycle and it was packed. So, Lady Robinson's Beach, Cook Park is an asset to all of Sydney.
Absolutely.
So it really does deserve money from beyond just our council to maintain that facility. A couple of questions, in particular around the Sandringham baths, noting that at the current time, the diagram that we've been given only provides stair access to the baths. And I know I put a motion to council about beach accessibility, and there was a beach audit being done around this time that was delayed from previous times. I wondered if this has been gone through that beach accessibility audit, because we certainly, I believe, which should be future-proofing all facilities, especially in an ageing community like it is in Sans Souci, to ensure that there is enabled for accessibility long-term.
Yeah, through the chair. So this was an engineering look at how we can fix the seawall issue. It hasn't gone to detailed design yet, and all those sort of inputs will feed into a detailed design. Definitely accessibility would form part of the brief for an architect and a detailed design, stage 2.
Excellent, thank you. I also had a few community people giving feedback around the parking that goes from the Lasanne's restaurant up until the President Avenue. So there's currently parallel to curb parking along there, and there were some inquiries whether or not it would be safe to put parallel parking along that. I know we're looking at parking later, but we're also looking at parking in specifically this beach reserve in this report, whether that could be considered for parallel parking, or if the traffic management studies could be done. There already is some traffic management studies being done for a section here for Monterey for changing the parking. Is that a possibility?
Through the chair, are you talking about off-street parking or on the Grand Parade?
On the Grand Parade, parallel to the curb between the Lasanne's restaurant and President Avenue, there's quite a lot of parking along there that has quite a wide shoulder, and there was questions around whether that could be turned into parallel parking. Oh, sorry, nose to the curb parking.
Reverse to curb, yeah.
Yeah.
Through the chair,
Angle
it'd be something we'd have to lobby Transport for New South Wales to investigate and lead, given it's the Grand Parade State Road.
So is that something that could be taken on notice for this meeting
Yep,
to
take it on notice, yeah.
explore?
I think the first point would be to test that suggestion with the Department of Transport. Nose to curb angle parking on such a busy state road would be a very unusual solution. And certainly if you think about the discussions that were being had a year or so ago about clearways,
Yeah.
it sort of flies in a different direction.
Yeah.
We'll ask the question, but I think it's something that would be out of our remit.
Yeah.
And the first thing would be just to check if there's any appetite at all to do something as different as that.
Yeah, I mean, there is obviously, like, I was concerned around any safety issues with the reversing and how much space there is actually required, but worth looking at additional parking along the foreshore, which we're also looking at.
I know the illusion is
Councillor
you
Barlow.
get more parking with angles, but how many is it average? It's not as many as everyone thinks, is that correct?
It depends on the road configuration.
Reverse it to angle, and you, for every 5 cars you get maybe 2 spaces or 1 space.
It very much depends on the road configuration. Sometimes, for ease of access in and out, you prefer angled parking. 45 degrees, you can lose 2 or 3 parks, but again, it just depends on the layout.
I have one other question around seagrass. We are doing a campaign, Bayside Council, to preserve the seagrass and build awareness around that. And this is an obvious opportunity for us to build in some zones for nature. Could we hear from the officer around what's being considered in terms of seagrass protection in this plan?
Through the chair, all our approvals would require seagrass protection. Every time we try to do anything in the bay itself, we need to go and survey the seagrasses. Even with the recent sand renourishment project, we need to go and do a survey in a year's time to ensure that we haven't had a negative impact on the seagrasses. This project hasn't touched on expanding the seagrasses, more focusing on the intertidal zones at the moment. But yeah, we're definitely looking at ecological outcomes. So.
Yeah, it might be that a complement to this campaign to protect the beach might be to think of areas where we could make it exclusive to activities that don't involve destruction of the seagrass, i.e. jet skis. There was about 25 parked on the beach at Brighton next to each other on Sunday, and it was more like a car park than actually a beach. So I think there would be a complementary development here. Any other discussion? Well, all those in... Oh, sorry, Councillor Kassim.
Oh, just another little thing. I can't find where I read it now, but there was reference to some consultations, I think 3 or 4 areas in which there would be connection to Aboriginal heritage here. But I don't remember mention being made of the Camo Rangers. Again, and I know that council has a connection to them already because you ran that lovely activity earlier in the year, the fishing activity, yeah, which was the mullet run, which was excellent. But it does occur to me that this is actually an opportunity again to sort of bring to the fore more the Aboriginal history, including, I mean, we know that, where the Cooks River was moved, like where it came out was moved, the impact that had on the whole environment and what happened along Walleye Creek. So in a way, it's and to remember, I guess, the Aboriginal history of the area. So I guess I'm encouraging more of that, because it's also another opportunity for even for getting sort of particular project or project funding to do that as an educative function for the whole Gamay area. Yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, you're exactly right. It's a requirement to get some of the state government funding that we do engage with the First Nations people, and we plan on meaningfully integrating their narratives into the design as we develop this design further.
Could be a good educative function for the whole population. Thank you.
Any further discussion? No? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
So that recommendation has been passed. We will now move on to CWA 24.035, response to notice of motion on-street parking review, Brighton Le Sands. Could we please have the officer's report?
Through the chair, this is the on-street parking of the parking review for Brighton Le Sands, and we'll also look at the Transport for New South Wales proposals that were associated with the abandoned Clearway project. Going backwards. As the report indicated, we investigated about 27 streets in the Brighton Le Sands catchment area for the possibility for increasing on-street parking. We had to take into consideration the existing road configuration and road widths to see if there was a net, because we'll be losing parallel parking, whether there was a net gain and whether it was worth pursuing. And we've come up with 10 streets that have been identified that have the potential to increase on-street parking by more than 5 places. And those are listed on the screen there. I think it's worth mentioning that back in 2019, we did have a detailed look at Teralba Street. There was a design done for 90-degree angle parking that showed it resulting 19 spaces being gained. And during the consultation, we received a petition against the proposal with 148 signatures, and we also consulted with 300 households by letterbox drop and received a response rate of 35%, with all opposed to the proposal and not a single letter of support. So I think we just need to be careful on community consultation before we push ahead with some of these proposals. Looking at the Transport for New South Wales proposals, we have started working on several of these. This proposal, which involves the closure of Princess Street, it would be subject to a traffic management plan if we did close Princess Street, and currently Transport for New South Wales turnaround times are about 18 months for that closure. But we have been progressing this design. The proposal's been to the Traffic Committee and received in principle support. It's now with our design team. We're working through some of the issues with it, which includes the fact that it doesn't provide any turnaround area. If all the parking spots are occupied. So the team are looking at moving those spaces up the page, I suppose, in front of that laneway that's already blocked off in Princess Street to create a turnaround circle. And we're also looking at if we widen the curb by 300 or 400 millimetres, we might be able to include the curbside parking and increase the parking availability there anymore. And we're also considering the impact on waste surfaces and whether we can create a proposal that works for them as well. To Albert Street, similarly, it involves a proposal to close Albert Street at the Grand Parade and install 12 angled parking spaces for a net gain of 4. Again, that design hasn't allowed for a turnaround area, and it would result in people backing up and into a private residential driveway to turn around if all the parking spaces were occupied. So the design team again are working on a more suitable design for the area. Similarly, it's been to Bayside Traffic Committee and got in principle support. And again, if it did involve the full road closure, we would be held to ransom for Transport for New South Wales to approve that before we could construct anything. There's another proposal that Transport for New South Wales had at O'Neill Street. It involves a net gain of 7 car parking spaces. The design isn't being worked on at present, but the traffic engineers have identified several issues with the turning movements that are proposed. I'm sure we could work through them. And the plan is, following the completion of the other 2 streets, we'll start working on the designs for this one. So the recommendation is that we prepare concepts for the 10 streets that have been identified for potential to meaningfully increase the parking in the area and consult with the community on those proposals and report that back through the local traffic committee.
Thank you. Do we have a mover and a seconder for that item? Councillor Strong, Councillor Morrissey, seconded by Councillor Strong. Any discussion?
With Princess Street, is the plan still to block it off at it's not to be blocked off there, or?
We're still working through options, but we're thinking we could...
Overtall is the one that will be directly affected.
The current thinking is not to have it totally blocked. I think it's to have either an exit or an entry to block one way.
Yeah, okay.
But the designers are still working through different options.
Okay, because you've got some here, there's only plus 4 spaces. What's the costing for each one that we change? For plus 4 spaces, does that worth whatever it's going to be?
Through the chair, the recommendation's only to progress and investigate ones where it's at least 5 or more. So the 10 streets identified are all in excess of 5 additional spaces.
So if we haven't got, oh no, the RMS consulted with everyone, didn't they?
Through the chair, Transport have not consulted with the community on these, no.
Nobody had, okay.
I think the point that Councillor Barlow's making is that a net gain of 4 by blocking off those streets falls below the threshold of what we've said for the rest of the investigations for the parking. So why are we accepting a lower threshold for blocking off streets, which is what Councillor Barlow said is quite an expensive exercise?
Through the chair, so our designs are looking at accepting that a net gain of 4 isn't acceptable. So that's why I mentioned we could move the curb 300 or 400 mil and gain and maintain the 3 or 4 parallel parking spots to increase the gain there. And I suppose blocking it off at the Grand Parade was also a sort of a placemaking initiative from Transport for New South Wales. But again, we haven't been to the community and got their views on it yet, so we're trying to work out the best design before we present it to the community.
Yeah, I mean, as a ward councillor for Ward 5, I know that there'll be quite a lot of pushback against this. I know that there was a lot of upset people on Princess Street, for instance, when the original Transport for New South Wales blocking off of that street was proposed. And there is already concern around the exit from the Seychelles development, that the exit should be pushing people onto Princess Street rather than down the laneway and out onto the next street, which I think is Gordon. And I've been asked to pursue that actually as an issue. So this plan would that allow for access from the Seychelles development onto Princess Street, or because of those additional car parking spaces, that laneway that runs the Princess Lane will no longer be an access route?
I might have to take that on notice. Princess Lane is already blocked at Princess Street.
It is at the moment, but the residents from the neighbouring, which were the ones that were really impacted by the Seychelles water, got me down there for a site visit, and they said that what they would like to see is the parking from the Seychelles that it currently is planning to come up and down Princess Lane toward Gordon Street instead comes up and goes out onto Princess Lane.
I'll have to take it on notice. We'll have to take it on notice.
Okay. And yeah, equally, will we have business consultation for these as well? Because I know that corner for the Terralba Street, for instance, there's a pizza place and a donut place that, you know, rely on people being able to pull over. There's a couple of 5-minute parkings out the front, but not many. So actually having the street blocked off would mean that those businesses could potentially be impacted by that lack of customer accessibility. So will businesses be also consulted?
Through the chair, most definitely. There'll be extensive consultation, as there is for any proposal that goes back to the local traffic committee. Everyone will be consulted. I suppose this has come about from a notice of motion, so we're just implementing the notice of motion.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other further discussion? All those in favour of the motion say aye. Aye. All those against? I declare the motion carried. So we'll now move on to the next item. Which is CWA 24.036, the Capital Projects Program update, Q1. Do we have an officer's report?
Through the chair. The Capital Projects Program for 24-25 has a total investment value of $44.5 million. The program includes a range of projects being delivered across council, and it's broken up, as you can see on the screen, in terms of roads and transport, buildings and property, our open spaces. The program also includes our plant and fleet replacement, IT and communications, so it's not only built infrastructure. The City Projects team has $22.7 million allocated to the team to deliver, and that equates to 105 projects. So it's a significant program in terms of a lot of design and planning is in this financial year as we start to ramp up into construction of some of our large projects. As at the end of Q1, being the end of September, we had completed 17 of those projects, many of which would have been projects over multiple financial years and were being completed towards the end of last year. We have a number of projects that are pending approvals and are on hold until they've passed a checkpoint, I guess, in terms of the strategic alignment with Council CSP. And we had spent $3.6 million of the budget. Blank screen. There we go. The project management framework that Bayside Council has, the elected officials, yourselves, the elected council provide our business leadership. Internally, we have project boards and decision makers being project control groups, our strategic asset management committee and our executive committee. Myself, as project manager, I'm responsible for reporting those projects up to those committees, and then internally I have a design team and a construction team delivering those projects. Onto the project status, we do have one project that's at risk, being the car park storage for the dog club. We have had some delays in a new storage facility due to suppliers and rising costs. We do believe we have a way forward with that is within the current budget and program, so that will recommence shortly. We have a number of projects that are pending briefs and pending signing off of grants, being the lighting and the pedestrian crossing program, the Seaforth detention basin and the Springvale drain upgrade, but they will start in Q2. And we have a significant delay to our Mount Olympus lighting due to extensive delays that we've had with Ausgrid. And many of you that have previously sat on council would have seen this project for a number of years. This calendar year alone, we've had 5 cancelled Ausgrid shutdowns, and we're pending a date in January to recommission that work. In terms of projects that were on hold through Q1 and now will commence work, a lot of these have been coming through our master plan stage. So when I say on hold, they have been working in other teams, but the city projects team hasn't commenced on them. So there's been a lot of work on Muddy Creek, Much Park, Riverine Park, the Community Cultural Centre, the upcoming netball courts, Scarborough Park Master Plan, Spring Street Naturalisation, and the Arncliffe to Barton pedestrian links. And you'll start to see updates on those in the coming months. We've had a number of quarterly adjustments which will come to you as part of the City Performance QBRS next week and then on to Council. We've had grants that we were successful in after the program was endorsed, and we've had decisions that were made through July Council meeting that missed the actual program rollout. That will bring us up to, after the quarterly one adjustment, the City Projects program will come up to $31 million from the 22.7. So a few key updates. I've just listed a handful of projects. There's obviously 105 and I don't want to keep you here all night. But we are doing the basketball courts at the 3-point shooting circles at the moment. One of those is at Tonbridge Reserve, the other at Shaw Street, Bexley. They're under construction, anticipated to be complete by the end of the calendar year. The beach hut at Dolls Point, we've gotten to what's called the gateway checkpoint in terms of our planning proposal. So that's for renewal of the restaurant and cafe. And that means that our development application can be lodged by the end of this month. And that will go through an approvals process through 2025, and then we'll procure for construction. Botany Aquatic Centre, in July, the last term of council endorsed a budget of $83.1 million for the redevelopment of Botany Aquatic Centre. We are pending our regional planning panel date, which we're anticipating in December, and then we'll be tendering the project for construction in the new year. You'll be getting a report to council on the outcomes of that tender. We did do an expression of interest and have a shortlist, but you'll see the outcomes of that in the new year. And then we'll go on and get a construction certificate and commence, and that is planned for mid next year.
It's not design and construct, it's just construct.
Through the chair, it is not design and construct. There'll be elements that have that, but the overall project has been fully designed.
I just feel it should have gone the way it was there, but anyway, I've argued that the whole time. The whole was there. Anyway.
Another project listed is the demolition of the former Botany Administration Building. The Strategic Land and Property Working Group and subsequent council meeting endorsed for the demolition in March 2024. We're currently going through a planning approval stage and hazardous materials report, and then we'll be bringing a report in early 2025 on the tender outcomes and hoping to start demolition mid next year. Mascot Oval, at the council committee and council meeting in July 2024, council endorsed $23 million of funding towards the project. The functional design was approved in January of this year. We've got concept designs that are ready to go out for community consultation, and we've been undertaking extensive consultation with the sporting clubs. And that will move towards detailed design and approvals next calendar year. Thank you.
Thank you for that lovely report. Is there a mover and a seconder for that? Move Councillor Curry, seconded Councillor Morrissey. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So just a couple things. So can you go back to the slides, please? And can you go to the ones, what did I say it was, on hold, please? On hold slide. I think it was slide 3 or 4 or something.
Page 127.
I want it up there. That's okay. I'll use the online document. Yeah, just in relation to those project status on hold. So what's the reason for these being on hold?
Through the chair, so they haven't come to the city projects team for commencement. We've got it up on the screen now, thank you. So they're with other teams in terms of we haven't started the financial spend on those. They might be, for instance, like River and Park Master Plan, our strategic planning team were undertaking the works internally. So it hasn't been handed to city projects in the commencement of the spend of the project. So there's work happening with our strategic planning team, but we don't start the capital expenditure as yet.
Oh, thank you. GM, would it be possible to get an update on the timing of those projects when we'll please? The next meeting?
Yep.
Next meeting's fine.
We can give you more detail on that. And I think too, probably on hold might be not the best language to use. Like if someone sees the presentation, it sounds like the whole project has stopped, whereas it just means it actually hasn't come yet to city projects.
I was going to say just a couple of dot points. Like we don't need a full deep dive. It's just it's on hold. But what does on hold mean, and what's the current status? Who's with? What's the next action?
And then just the other one in relation to Mascot. Oh, so if I come back to the demolition of the former admin building, so the budget that's there, so is that the full budget of demolition?
Through the chair, this financial year there's $100,000 for the building approval of hazardous material investments. In the drafts 25-26, we have 600,000 listed, which is yet to be endorsed by council, but that would be for the full demolition and rework as a car park or whatever that outcome is.
So that's going to come back once you have gone through the first stage of it?
Through the chair, yes, absolutely. You'll get a report on that, and internally there are some reviews of what the space will be turned into, and that will come back as part of a report.
Okay, thank you. And the next one is Mascot Oval. So I note and appreciate that that's gone through full community consultation. There's a signed off agreement. So why is it taking, well, like we're going to go out for community consultation. Why is a design document taking 8 months?
Through the chair, so that's the full detailed design. So we'd be coming up with engineering, our architecturals, hydraulics, mechanical specifications, a full lighting design, and also for the development application approval. So it is a significant facility, and the drawings need to be ready to construct the facility. And for something of that size, it would take 6 to 9 months to document fully.
Is that standard?
I mean, in some cases, it may even be up to 12 for a larger, more complex facility. It's in line with the documentation for the grandstand at Barton Park and the field upgrades and lighting documentation there. That took around 9 to 10 months.
So I'm just conscious of, obviously, because there'll be skip a time frame when when our sporting groups will have to go, when it'll be out of use, basically. So I know that you did that mapping previously, which was much sooner than what this timeline is, but have you factored that into the timeline again?
Through the chair, we've been talking quite extensively to the club, and we had their board come in and talk about logistics. The field can remain operational, and we'd be moving them into, the gym and providing them extra facilities while we do the grandstand, and then we would alternatively move them back to the grandstand and then take the gym offline. So they have been working with us quite closely on that.
Okay, so is that community consultation? So when's that coming out?
Mid-November. So we had a meeting internally today, and it's all getting prepared to go live.
Great. Okay, so in the meantime, start any of that documentation?
We would start some of the detail of how the building's, the structure, but we wouldn't do all the finishing design work until we get some feedback from the community. We don't want to redo anything. No. That's the only thing. We wouldn't want to proceed too far ahead.
All right, thank you.
So, just a couple of questions. So with regard to the demolition of the old council building, I'm sure this has been taken into account. I'm just interested in what is planned. Is there an alternative space to be provided for SECC who are in there? Because
That's not being demolished.
it's not. That's not the one.
It's a different one.
It's a diff. Oh, I think it's the one I've seen on the side. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. That's actually not that big, and it's costing $600,000.
It goes right back.
It is a large building.
Okay, cool. Then the other question was just as someone who obviously hasn't seen the work you've done in the past, I would be interested to look at the whatever it is, 105, 110, the list, just to see what is coming up. Partly because people have maybe approached me about things which need to get done. If it's already on the list, beauty, tick, just to know what your plan is. Thank you.
I have a question specifically around the not commenced lighting pedestrian crossing program on page 126. I have parents from Kiama Public School, which I should declare I have a child at that school, so that might be non-significant, non-pecuniary conflict of interest, but they are very keen for a new crossing at Bestick Street, which has been approved, but keep being told it's coming, and I keep passing that information on. And I just would like to know if there is more of an update, because it just says not commenced in here.
Through the chair, Bestick Street is actually listed as a separate project outside of the program. It's all designed and ready to go. We do need Ausgrid to connect the lighting before, and we have had 2 cancellations due to their industrial action this year. We've now got a rescheduled date in January. Once the lighting's in, it will take us around 6 weeks to install the crossing, so we're still hopeful that that can be done in this financial year.
Thank you, before school starts, ideally. Thank you. Is there any other discussion?
Hi, sorry, it's Councillor Boudelet. I just had a quick question just off Councillor Kasim's question around the list of projects. Is that something that's publicly available, something that we can track and have available for the public so we can let them know where there are potential delays, the stages of various projects? Thank you.
Through the chair, the list of projects is publicly available, being our capital projects program. We can certainly provide a quarterly update which has milestones and tracking.
Thank you.
With the administration building, it's only the rear of the building, is it? It's not the whole building? Where Wingate was going to go? Oh, okay, so it's the whole building. I recognise the horrible thing on the top floor, that whatever that, okay.
Any further discussion, councillors? Can we put that to a vote now? All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, nay. I declare the motion carried. So we will now move on to the next item, which is CWA 24.037, response to notice of motion sporting fields. Could we please have a report from the officers?
Through the chair. Just to give you a little bit of a recap, so in terms of our all-weather fields, Council has 7 all-weather fields being Ador, Arncliffe, Bicentennial, Brighton Memorial, Gardner Park, Hensley Athletic and McCarthy Reserve. We have implemented as part of our best practice to ensure that we have a 90 centimetre apron buffer around all of our fields in accordance with the Chief Scientist guidelines. In reference specifically to the notice of motion, it was submitted on the 27th of July and it asks that Council provides a report with options for the installation of an all-weather field at Jellicoe Park Pagewood, Lestrange Park Mascot and Kingsgrove Avenue Reserve Bexley, and this investigation should draw on the significant advancements made in developing environmentally friendly all-weather playing surfaces, and that we provide a comprehensive report. Just to touch on the Chief Scientist report, that was released in June of 2023 and a report did come to Council on that report. The Council resolution was that Council notes the publication of the Chief Scientist and Engineer's report on synthetic turf in public open spaces, and that Council notes planned actions that will be implemented while we await the Department's guidelines, and those planned actions was ensuring we had that implementation of that 90 centimetre buffer zone. The Council also notes that it still has a moratorium in place on the development of new synthetic fields and that a further report be brought back to Council once the guidelines are issued by the Department of Planning and Environment. So those draft guidelines were put on exhibition from March to April of 2024, and the guidelines are intended to help decision makers, planners, sports fields managers make informed decisions about the use of synthetic turf for sporting purposes. So the guidelines include strategies and case studies to inform. They don't give hard and fast rules about what you should and shouldn't do. It's really research backed up information to provide guidance. And the guidelines don't cover synthetic turf in private residential spaces or streetscapes or our play spaces. So it's specific to the sporting fields. So some of the risks and concerns that we have looked at as part of the review of the 3 fields from the notice of motion. Each of the park has some flood considerations. So flood mitigation, stormwater management could impact things like the height of the field and have sightline impacts into private properties. An approval process would be needed via likely a review of environmental factors. We would need to undertake an economic feasibility, which would be ongoing maintenance and replacement costs. And we would need to ensure that the outcomes of that Chief Scientist report, the draft guidelines, are included in terms of a review of the material selection. So in terms of that, what we will be looking at is there are synthetics that have no infill. There are ones that have different infill material, cork, walnut husks. You know, there's a lot of different opportunities to look at that. We would also investigate as part of any feasibility hybrid. And I guess that's the point of tonight's paper, is really to say that in order to come up with a specific material, we would need to do an investigation and feasibility. One of the big considerations also is the impact on current infrastructure in the parks. So we need to think about other sporting codes when we're doing any changes to the park. and any impact on look and feel that an all-weather surface might have. So I'll hand over to Bryce, who will talk through some of the flooding.
Thanks. So, yes, in terms of flooding, many of our sports fields are constructed on low-lying flood-prone areas. That's general across the state. Generally, they end up the sites that aren't suitable for property development, and they also often serve as a storage capacity function as well. When we're talking about flooding, we talk in terms of annual exceedance probability, AEP, which is the chance, which is a probability in any 1 year of a flood exceeding a certain event. We used to talk in terms of 1 in 100-year floods, but I think that's a bit misleading. For instance, between February 2020 and July 2022, we had 4 separate 10% AEP events. So in a 2-year period, we had 4 floods that, using the old terminology, would have been known as 1 in 10-year floods. So now we talk in terms of probability. Looking at the specific sites that have been proposed, Kingsgrove Avenue Reserve is probably the most problematic site in terms of flood behaviour. There is a very defined flood path across that oval. We've got a large stormwater pipe. It's about 1,300 millimetre capacity, which surcharges at the Kingsgrove Avenue end in relatively frequent events. This is showing the amount of water that did flow across that field in a 1 in 5 year flood or a 20% AEP. About 40% of that field's covered. And if you've been down there and seen the new amenities, you'd see that it's quite elevated to raise the floor level above that flood path that exists. And those pits are in the slab between the 2 buildings. This just shows you that the 1% event, quite extensive coverage of water across that field. About 80% of the field's considered flood storage. If we were to divert that flow, obviously there's definitely flow-on effects upstream and downstream of the catchment to try to move that flow of water from where it is flowing on the low point there. The next slide just reiterates the velocity. It's a river that runs across there. It's not so much a flood storage; it's a flood path, and the yellows and the oranges are just indicating the speed of the water that flows through there. The next field we're looking at is Lestrange. It's more of a flood storage situation than a flow path. We've got waters moving from the west, moving west and south across that field, but also pooling in that southern and western area. So in that pretty frequent 20% event, about a third of the field is considered flood storage. Similarly to Kingsgrove Avenue Reserve, the new amenities there has been elevated to keep the floor level above that, above that flood level. And obviously, if we try to displace that flood storage, there is impacts both upstream and downstream. The next slide just reiterates that's that 1% event, and you've got about half the field of flood storage. It's quite a volume of water to try and put somewhere else if that's what's required. Lastly, Jellicoe Park, it's less problematic. There is some localised ponding due to the topography of the site, but the water predominantly moves along Park Parade and into the golf course. And Jellicoe Park in the current topography and doesn't have a huge impact or a huge benefit on flooding through that area there. So in terms of suitability, I think from a flood perspective, it's clearly the most suitable of the 3 sites, the least problematic. And I'll hand back to Louise. That's the end of flooding. Oh, sorry, there's one more. So this is just an example from Lismore of the sort of issues that flood paths and flooding can have on synthetic fields. So picture says it all.
Yeah. In terms of technical feasibility, if we were to progress to that, we would review the outcomes of the Chief Scientist report, would review recent technologies, infills, hybrid technologies, would undertake survey and understand the levels, any services within the field. We'd do detailed flood modelling if we are raising fields or making any changes to the topography. We need to understand where that water would go. Geotechnical and contamination testing so that we know the ground structure, any removals of contaminants that we may have to deal with. Arborist study on our surrounding trees, a heritage review, not for the parks themselves, but they are in heritage, 2 of them are in heritage overlay areas, so that would be a consideration through the review of environmental factors, reviewing our current plans of management, and obviously undertaking a lighting study to make sure any new field configuration is appropriately lit. So we've done an estimate of cost for those feasibility studies, and the items listed on the screen are things that would go external to the cost of $180,000, and this is for one park, a feasibility study. Internal staff would do the review of the Chief Scientist report, reviewing the draft guidelines, and also our financial team can do the economic review, working with our maintenance teams on ongoing costs and feasibility as well. In terms of the program, if council endorses us to proceed, we could start in January, an estimate of approximately 6 months to undertake the full technical and economic feasibility, which would both run concurrently, and we could bring a report back to council in August, September. I have put together, if we were to proceed past feasibility, obviously it would depend on the outcomes of that feasibility study, but if that was approved to proceed from that point, we would procure external consultants for the synthetic or weather or hybrid, whatever that becomes, the design, and then undertake community consultation and approvals process, detailed design and documentation, and tender the project for construction. So it is looking at construction over the 27-28 financial year. Thank you.
Move that way.
Thank you. So we have a recommendation before us that the committee endorses funding for $180,000 to be included in the Q2 budget review for the feasibility of an all-weather field at Jellicoe Park, Pagewood, noting that the 3 sites previously identified by council, this is the most viable option, and we've had that moved by Councillor Curry and seconded by Councillor Morrissey. Is there any discussion?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that comprehensive report. And the work undertaken, and I appreciate that there has been a lot of development in the type of fields, and appreciate that we're going to look at a range of options that are potentially available to see what is the best option there. And I guess I can only speak for Lestrange and Jellicoe. They're both sand. Regardless, I think, the option for Jellicoe works really well. There's, I know there's some things in there like arborist report and things, but, there's no trees there anyway. So I think there's, certainly savings that can be made around there. Just in relation to Lestrange, there's also a flooding issue there at the moment, and Kingsgrove, hence why those fields miss a lot of their sporting competition, because they're 2 of the leaning towards the bigger clubs now, and so they actually, it's the flooding, because we haven't got the proper mitigations in place to manage that flooding, and therefore, so I think it's really important that, we have a shortage of sporting fields. The popularity of football's increasing dramatically, particularly with girls. As an example, Pagewood is now 1,700 players. It's the biggest club in this part of Sydney. Other clubs, both Kingsgrove and Mascot, have almost doubled as well in the last season. So there's a lot more young kids, particularly girls, wanting to play it. So, and when the majority of the competition can play, but others can't train and can't play, that creates inequity for these teams. So regardless, I think we need to look at what can we do to those fields to ensure that they are sound and playable and looking at the options that are available to provide quality sporting grounds. So whether that's the new types of grass, the hybrids, whatever that is, I think it's really important that they all stay on further investigation because we're already running out of we're out of sporting fields. We have people wanting to we just don't have enough sporting fields. So what we do have, we have to ensure they are of a high standard so that they can be utilised and utilised for longer periods because we just don't have the capacity to rest them as much as we'd like to rest them because of the demands of our growing population and, the desire for young people to play sport, which we want, right? We want our kids playing sport and we want them active. So just in relation to the feasibility, so is there an opportunity for economies of scale if you were doing a feasibility in one go across the 3 sites?
Through the chair, some of the approvals and things that maybe could be packaged up might have some benefit, but things like ground testing, flood modelling, a lot of those will be quite site specific, so we may not get a benefit in that way.
But there may be some opportunities if the more generalised aspects of it are packaged up. You said.
Through the chair, yes, we could seek quotations and see if we can get more economical if they're packaged together. Some of them will require more modelling than others. Yeah, and we've put an estimate together without. What we've put together in the presentation is estimates of previous studies rather than going for full quotes for them.
Okay, thank you for that.
Can I ask a question just in regards to that? So this list of items and costs and time estimates is based on a hybrid or synthetic or weather field. How does it differentiate with a best practice natural turf field like Barton Park, where there was a lot of drainage work done to really help with any flooding or disturbance issues?
Through the chair, the studies that we've put together are specific for all weather, so the hybrid or the infill. A natural turf, we know that we have them in those locations, so we can certainly, if we wanted to improve drainage and look at things like that in the other locations, that's something that we can do. Both of the other fields are low-lying. Barton is not, and Barton does have a heavy base of sandstone that we've put in place and were elevated, so you have that benefit. That's not to say that you couldn't improve the other fields with drainage and a layering process, but you are still in an area that floods, and it is flood storage, so we can't push it onto private properties. That's our catchment.
Yeah, I know that Barton Park used to be level and it's gradually built up over time. Do we have any other discussion?
Councillor Boodley here, if I could, I'll leave it to the committee first if they wanted to speak.
I think Councillor Kassim and Councillor Barlow did want to speak, Councillor Boodley, so Councillor Kassim.
Yeah, no, I was just going to follow on from what you were saying, Councillor Douglas. I guess I'm wondering about what interim measures might take place, because just further to what Councillor Curry was saying, these are really high demand fields, and we're talking 3-4 years really, like presuming everything, all the boxes are ticked on time, etc., which is quite a long time. So, I go back to the flood briefing we had, where, I think Bryce, you were saying that it's like you can't send this water anywhere. Are there any precedents for actually creating more detention, like, digging a hole, basically, with... Yes, Yeah, like creating something else which could provide something in the short term at least.
Sorry, if I could just, and I will defer to the staff, but something like that is not a short-term solution.
Yeah.
That would actually be part of a very extensive project and a very expensive project. So if, for instance, council said, regardless of the flooding, we want to see an all-weather field at Kingsgrove, we would then have to look at the size of the more than Olympic-sized swimming pool that would need to go into the ground to retain the floodwaters, and building something on top of it. So it's part of a major piece of infrastructure that would need to be built as part of a bigger project.
Right. So there's nothing that can be done with natural turf, and in the meantime, no improved drainage which could be done in the meantime, leaving natural turf there for the while.
Can I suggest that we have a lot of information about that. That opens up a whole different discussion to what's been brought to you tonight.
Yeah.
So there's the financial comparisons that we've done, quite detailed financial comparisons of doing something like a scaled down Barton Park type of turf field, the capital outlay, the high level of maintenance required to ensure that that stays fit for purpose, the number of hours you can play on that versus an all-weather field, so your hourly return on investment. I think they're the sorts of things that we've touched on with the former council, but we've got more up-to-date and detailed figures now. We could certainly come back to you with some of that information.
That'd be great, thank you. I mean, I know that we were supposed to have a floodplain committee this afternoon, I think, which got cancelled. So I don't know, is that right? It was in my diary, and then it just disappeared. Is that the sort of thing which might be covered then too, or not?
Through the chair, the floodplain risk management committee is higher level, looking at the whole of catchment type studies, whereas this is a very small part of a catchment.
Sure,
So
but that'll happen. That will get rescheduled, I presume.
it will be rescheduled, and I'll make sure the invites have been sent for the rescheduled.
Thank
It's
you.
February, I think the first one is.
All right.
Councillor Barlow, you had a...
Just a question. I was going to, I think, possibly move a foreshadowed motion that this is deferred until there's further information, especially about the types of natural turfs that we can get, that I won't be supporting. We had a resolution we would not have another all-weather field as such. So I'd like it to be deferred to get further information on the hybrid turf, which was mentioned on the night, but didn't seem to get into it. So it's a lot of money. I think, what's the other field now? You said Jellicoe's at Lestrange. When you see that flooding come into that corner, where's that water going to go if you block it when it naturally goes that way? So there's a lot more information I think needs to be there. So I'm just going to move it, that it's deferred until we have further information on the types of surfaces, which possibly could be laid at Kingsgrove. That's a grass that won't wear out, and there is types of grass that apparently, as James, former councillor McDonald, knows it all. But maybe that should be looked at first, because maybe it can be done that way. I was at Kingsgrove when it was opened, and all their stuff has been built up so high because of the flooding. So, and they are desperate. And I remember on the night I said, if you can come back with the funding, it'd be great, because council hasn't got the money.
do we have a seconder for the foreshadowed motion? Councillor Strong?
I agree. We need to look into possible natural turf options in this situation.
If you click the round,
The clear stuff around the microphone.
the base of it, the base, you know the, yeah, that's...
Yeah, I think considering how unpopular in a lot of sections of the sporting community synthetic fields have become for many reasons, from microplastic pollution being too hot to play on in certain hot days, I think we should really push the envelope to look into natural turf options as well in this study. So I agree with the foreshadowed motion to change the mode of the study to include natural turf options.
We need to go to Councillor Boudelet, who is waiting patiently.
Thank you. I'll be super brief. Look, I think personally, I think deferring the motion is not the right move. I know a lot of these communities have been waiting for adequate sporting facilities for years. I think having natural turf as part of the study makes sense. I think, look, I'm personally agnostic when it comes to what options are there, particularly in Mascot. I know there's, for example, Mascot Kings has more than 800 members there. A lot of the season they can't play. We want kids to play sport, as Councillor Curry says. 100% agree. So, my view, I'd love for this to come to full council with Lestrange Park as part of that study. But I just think there needs to be some options for the community, particularly in this area. There's just nothing at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Morrissey.
Thank you. Just on the back of what Councillor Boudelet said and what the officers said earlier, I think if there's any opportunity to realise benefits of scale, we should do that. So if I can just propose a second point to the recommendation as it stands. I haven't typed it up, so do you want to... I haven't sent it to you.
Maybe read it out.
I'll just read it out, if you can type it up. That council, so point 2, when obtaining quotes to support feasibility studies, obtaining to support feasibility studies, include Lestrange Park and Kingsgrove Avenue within the scope where possible to achieve economies of scale. Does that make sense to council officers? In that basically when we're going out, the intention is to say, okay, well, this is if it is supported by council, we just add this on as okay, these 3 things can be included in that, and what's the price? It'll all have to come back anyway, but yeah, it's just so it stays on the agenda. And if we can achieve economies of scale, given the timeline out to 3, 4, 5 years potentially, we wouldn't want to see the end and then, so let's start again on phase 2, just try and get that. Thanks.
Kasim.
Sorry. And similarly, then I haven't written it down, so I'll just try and compose it now. Further to what I was saying, that that council investigate interim measures which might be taken to enhance the yeah, sorry. You're
Number 3.
you can fix the typos in 2 in a minute.
So there's still a foreshadow at the bottom of that, but
Yeah, that what was I saying? That investigate, interim measures which might be to enhance the the quality, but it's rather than all weather. It's because it's not. There's a difference between all weather and natural. It is, to improve the flood mitigation options, to enhance the capacity for use of all 3 existing fields. In terms of flood mitigation, yeah.
Jellicoe's fine, it's the other 2.
It's Lestrange, yeah. And then,
to enhance the flood mitigation strategies currently in place.
To improve the quality of the playing fields.
Yeah. In wet weather.
Full stop.
Well, okay. Maybe full stop.
Could I just ask the question with part 2 to support feasibility studies including, is that going to be 180,000 plus? Because you're saying 180,000 was for one park. So it'll be plus, 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 so we're actually voting blind about money.
No, it's the intent. Sorry, Councillor. Hello. No, the intent is that when the council officers said that they're getting quotes to confirm, this is like estimates, they're getting quotes to confirm, that when they're getting the quotes, they include that as a line item as well. So the intent is for point 2 is not to incur any extra expenditure, but to identify what that might be.
To come back.
It'll come back.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you've got a flood study, it's going to take $50,000.
Yeah.
The flood study would not be included in the overall. There was some items on there that are quite general, and then there was some site
So
specific.
which ones are general? If you take it out so you know exactly what you're voting for.
Well, they haven't got the quotes yet, they've just done a.
Sorry, GM might have some clarity.
Through the chair, I do agree that point 1 was very specific to feasibility work that would be done for Jellicoe Park only. We won't be able to go out and get detailed quotations done without any source of funding. So I think you are going to need to allocate a bit more money for us to be able to do that work. Yeah. 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 What? Oh, seriously.
I'm happy to reword number 2 to bring
Further information
I'd be guided
on- yeah.
on your. I think you understand the intent. I'm not trying to blindside anybody and spend money. It's just to keep them on the agenda. That if it's one for 180 and we're going 180, then we get 4 years and it's 220, and then another 4 years. Let's package up what we can for the same consultants where we can achieve that. So if you need to bring a subsequent report back, let's do that next month.
I'm not sure we'd be able to do it by December, but would you want us to proceed with Jellicoe to not hold that up at all? So virtually, if we can keep point 1 as it is, and the officers can then start proceeding on that work, and incidentally to that, and it may not be exactly in line timing-wise, we can look to getting quotes for works on the other 2 fields. Yeah. We just don't want to hold up point 1 while we do that.
I'm not attempting to incur any expenditure off the floor. I'm just saying keep it on the agenda. So if we're talking to consultants and they say it's X dollars for this bit, it's okay, well, that's right because we've got the funding, but how much extra for these as well, and then bring that back at the time. That's the intent.
The intent is to say, what are you going to charge us for the next bit of the quote? Is that right? Or they're not going to give you free information. That like each park has different flooding, and as the general manager said, which fascinated me, we'll have an Olympic-sized swimming pool under Kingsgrove Avenue, and I know they've got this giant retention pit between the 2 fields. So there's more to it than just that. So I can't support something where we don't know what the money is at all. And you keep asking, so we'll just have an interim one. And I think it's Lestrange, that flooding is will be treated totally different. You can't, it'll be the road flooding because it'll all go that way if you block it off. So looking at all the houses around up high. But anyway, I'll just move that, whatever I moved.
Maybe then just, GM, where the word is include Lestrange, include through subsequent reports to council.
Yeah, then
So as these progresses over the next 12, 18 months, 2 years, is to include that in subsequent reports to council. Yeah. Okay. Can we just update that, please? After we're include in point 2, where it says feasibility studies include, after include via subsequent reports to council.
It's got to be, it can't be the artificial turf. We're not doing it anymore.
It's not saying that, it's saying the feasibility studies for a range of options.
I wanted to ask about community consultation. We haven't had any community consultation on any of these parks, and we've had previously a lot of contention around a local synthetic field that ended up in a court case and was very stressful for, I think, council and the residents. So what would it take to actually do community consultation before we move to a feasibility study?
Through the chair, if we did community consultation prior to the feasibility, I don't think we could give a clear picture to the community of the impacts of what a field would do. We can't tell them, what height the field is, the location and things like that. So the feasibility would inform how we proceed, and then it would be best to go to the community with the outcomes of that feasibility and see if they support it.
And just following on from that, given that we have had that dispute around a synthetic field and also passed a motion previously at council to look at ways to reduce microplastics in the area, could we add an amendment to this that all the fields, that an option for natural turf also be investigated?
Well, haven't we got, all options?
Is that including point 1 though? That where it doesn't, at the moment, the current report doesn't have any nod towards natural turf as an option that's being investigated. You mentioned hybrid and synthetic, but there's been no specificity around natural turf being investigated. Can we make sure that that is included in the investigation?
Through the chair, they definitely can all be natural, and we can look at improvements in terms of drainage. So that could be part of the feasibility, but I guess there's no question from us in terms of can they stay as they are? Definitely.
That's a little bit confusing. So does the current point 1, does it cover an investigation for natural? Can we do an amendment that's point 4 that all fields also we'd be given an option for natural as well?
I think the staff really need some clear direction from the council. Point 1, and what we have been working on to this point, is to look at an all-weather option at Jellicoe Park. Yes, there were 2 other parks mentioned. The staff have assessed those initially and come back and said, really, they are going to be incredibly difficult, if viable at all. And Jellicoe is the preferred place to move forward. 180,000, we can go and do all of the studies and the investigations that are required to come back with the sort of advice you will need to be able to know whether you want to move forward or not. But I think as a council, it needs to be made very clear to the staff if that is still the intent, or if you want to expand it into something further.
Right, this is in response to a notice of motion which says a friendly or weather playing surface. That's what it says in the motion that was passed on the 27th of July. So that's the direction that council has provided. So if there's subsequent motions that need to be submitted, in my view, so be it. But we're dealing with the motion. This is in response. This is in response to a question. It's in there, councillors. I'm assuming this is verbatim what was agreed. That's the notice of motion. So we're not here at a committee that provides recommendations to council to change a notice of motion that was passed by everyone. Councillor Douglas abstained, and I respect that. That's fine. But that's what the council officers have brought to us. That's the decision tonight, and that's why number 1 is where it came from, and we're extending that to look at economies of scale and enhancing flood mitigation. So we can't actually now go and reverse an a notice of motion that was passed on the 27th of July. That's my understanding from a governance perspective as well. We're not here debating that motion because that was passed. That's, in my view, the clear direction to council officers.
But that's from the meeting we had, the investigation should draw on the significant advancements made in developing environmentally friendly all-weather playing surfaces.
And that's what Louise said they're going to do. They're looking at.
Well, that's what they're doing.
Looking at,
Is it?
walnut husk. Yeah, that is.
No
part of
infill.
this.
So I
I
think,
question environmentally friendly, sorry.
well, environmentally friendly, well, again, they're drawing on, we've been given guidance tonight that can improve, was walnut husks and cork and no infill. That's the motion that was passed. So I'm just questioning, in fact, I think council in its last term on 27th of July, and the minutes were confirmed in August that's what was said on that night and that's what was agreed. So we're not here to debate that. We're here to provide funding to support the next steps.
I mean, I think that the question has been raised because we're looking at natural turf options for the other fields, and where there's been no justification for why natural turf might not work also for Jellicoe. I've had quite a lot of residents contacting me and questioning that we've written in here, theme 3 in the community strategic plan is ticked that in 2032 Bayside will be a green, resilient and sustainable. I would like to know from the officer, how does adding a synthetic or hybrid field make Bayside green, resilient and sustainable?
Could I suggest that that is not something that we're going to answer from the floor? We can take it on notice. I think it's partly a rhetorical question, and it isn't what we have brought to you tonight. We've brought to you a very specific report on a very specific notice of motion. And while I do understand there are differences of views about whether or not this project should go to the next stage, as I said earlier, staff are simply looking for direction from you as to how you want us to proceed.
I mean, I think that from my point of view, the direction that I would like is that we also investigate natural turf, because if we want Bayside to be green, resilient and sustainable, synthetic turf is not a carbon sink, it's a carbon emitter, and so it goes against what we're trying to do in the rest of the council. So is there any reason why an investigation, a feasibility study could not also cover natural turf? Or are they very different things?
If that's a question to the staff, the staff, I think, have advised they can investigate any options that you determine and resolve them to do. But at the moment, we only have one resolution, and that's to investigate the feasibility for all weather. So it would take a change to the council resolution, the former resolution. It would take you to move and for council to adopt that former resolution of the council be expanded.
I mean, we are expanding it, we're adding amendments to it.
Can I just, Councillor Douglas, it seems to be we're a bit of an impasse, and I think we will be here for a long time. If I can respectfully suggest this is a committee that makes recommendations to council. It might be best to make the recommendation would be my preference, and then we can pull this out on the floor of council and deal with it more thoroughly.
Well, should we take it to a vote then? Unless there's any further discussion.
Sorry, just one more thing before I drop off. Sorry, Chair. I was just, not that I need an answer to this, just interested to know why, if you guys can let me know at some further point, why the other parks as well weren't costed in terms of study, why it was just the one. Obviously there was a preference there based on the studies made. And two, my view would be, I think, supporting Councillor Morrissey. Let's bring it to full council. Let's have it on the floor. And if we want to expand it, we do it then. But yeah, it'd be good at some point to know why only one park was costed in Lestrange and the other one was not.
Through the chair, Councillor Boutelet, the three parks were costed individually. It's 180,000 per park, but the advice from the officers is that the flooding on the other two parks are of such a magnitude that they could not recommend council spending 360,000 going further with feasibility at this point.
I know I don't have a vote on this committee, but my strong view would be to add Lestrange Park to that. And hopefully I'll have support from the other councillors, but I might leave you guys there and drop off at this point. Thank you. Thank you, Ward 2 councillors. Appreciate your support.
So should we take it to the vote for, we're initially voting on the amendments, which is that the committee endorsed funding for $180,000 to be included in the quarterly budget review for the feasibility study of an all-weather field at Jellicoe Park, Pagewood. That council, when obtaining quotes, support feasibility studies, including by subsequent reports to council, including Lestrange Park and Kingsgrove Avenue within the scope where possible to achieve economy of scale, and that council investigate interim measures to enhance the flood mitigation strategies currently in place to improve the quality of the playing fields. Well, I think we vote on the amendments first, and then if the motion is lost, we vote on the foreshadowed motion. I'm getting a nod from governance. Yeah. So can we put that to a vote, please?
Yeah.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
All those against say nay.
Which one are you voting on?
We're voting on this one.
No.
Nay. It's split, and I think I have a casting vote. Is that correct? So the motion is lost. Then we then vote on the foreshadowed motion, which I think needs to be put on the screen.
It's not written properly.
The foreshadowed motion that council deferred. And what was your intent there, Councillor Barlow? That council deferred the motion until types of natural surfaces.
Study of natural suitability of natural turfs.
That's going to incur funding. That's going to incur funding.
That this matter be
Environmentally friendly, well, that should be in the first one. But it wasn't, so you're classing it as only.
I'm just saying if you're going to do a further investigation, then there's no report on how much that's going to cost. We can't do it off the floor. So why don't you just say this matter be deferred full stop?
We'll just have the matter be deferred then. Well, you can't vote for anything without the funding either.
So add the question to the General Manager.
To add a little bit more complexity. So rather than have it a blanket deferral, there are things that have been identified in the project plan that would need to be done regardless of whether the final result is a synthetic or natural turf. What I would be suggesting is that we will come back with a potential wording for the council so that we can at least start commissioning some work and get some progress made about improving, whether it's Jellicoe and Lestrange, but at least we could move forward in commissioning some of the work, and we'll have some updated pricing for you by the council meeting.
Pending an updated report to be tabled at the upcoming council.
Yeah, it'll be very brief, but it'll basically be an update of the elements in the project plan and the costings for those.
Councillor Kassim.
Yeah, and I just something you said earlier, Meredith, led to a question for me. When you're saying that the officers in their investigations have come to the conclusion that those other two fields, which are highly flooded, they're almost lost causes, you're saying, in terms of in terms of being all-weather options. They could just be far too expensive, not really feasible. So what occurs to me then is, are we really talking about two different things here? So we are talking about investigate, like, number one, we're investigating all-weather fields for Jellicoe, but we're actually investigating natural turf options and interim measures. Improvements for the other two. And that maybe is.
What they are at this point in time.
Yeah, yeah, and also interim measures for Jellicoe, but certainly interim measures and long-term improvements for the other two fields, which could include natural turf options.
Or would you like to put that up as an amendment to the foreshadowed motion, Councillor Kassim?
No, I was just trying to confirm whether that's what was meant, and I think that might be.
It's not necessarily captured in the current foreshadowed motion, so. You can just deal with it at council.
Yeah.
Just get another updated report.
Yeah, I agree, but I'm just saying that sort of clarity in the report, that clarity would be useful. Yeah,
So
thank
are we
you.
moving the foreshadowed motion? That the matter be deferred to further investigation until, is it until Councillor Barlow? It doesn't quite make sense as it stands. That your foreshadowed motion that this matter be deferred for further investigation, are you mean here until?
Into the types.
About investigation, about the types of natural surface that are available and suited for these fields?
Report, yeah. Yeah, and these fields would be better than
These fields at the end?
these, plural.
So does that cover what you're also mentioning,
We'll get
General
something back
Manager?
to you for the council meeting. It'll be very brief, but we'll have some further information.
Okay, so should we put that to a vote? All those in favour say aye.
So
Aye.
we just say at the next council meeting.
For the next council meeting, added to the foreshadowed motion. You happy with that? We're now voting on the foreshadowed motion. So we're voting on the foreshadowed motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. The ayes have it. Thank you. So we'll move on to the next item, which is on my computer, but I have to scroll to find it. It is CWA 24.038, Wentworth Avenue and Page Street Shared Path Project Upgrade. Could we please have an officer's report?
Through the chair. A report came to the City Works and Assets Committee in July 2024 with an update on Wentworth Avenue and the Page Street Share Path project. At that committee, it was requested that we come back with some information on the bike network and a bit more history in terms of the strategic alignment of that project. So the bike plan was approved by Council in July 2024. And the Wentworth Avenue and Page Street Share Path project is an essential active transport upgrade within this network. The Wentworth intersection is essential as it distributes cyclists through Mascot, Botany, East Gardens, Hillsdale and Port Botany. And the green link that we have on the screen there is specifically trying to get people through Much Park, like sort of past Much Park and connecting through to Pagewood Public School. So the shared path along Wentworth Avenue is a key connection for active transport in the region. However, there is a 200-metre section near the intersection which remains narrow and outdated. Upgrading this section will ensure continuous and safe link between the western areas such as the airport, Mascot and Bayside's western suburbs and the eastern suburbs. This cycle route is a vital active transport corridor, provides access to highly populated areas and it completes the connection, particularly for school drop-off and pick-up, which is essential given this location. So the existing north connection is in place. Oops, sorry, just flicked slide there. The existing north connection is in place on Wentworth Avenue, and now we're trying to connect further south and also along the southern point of Page Street. And the link will actually provide safe access from the Pagewood Public School, giving a direct link up to a signalised intersection and then onto a share path implemented on Wentworth Avenue. Now, the project area that we're specifically talking about, and this component is grant funded by Transport for New South Wales, is to provide the link both along Wentworth and Page Street. And we also have VPA funding, which is to improve the signalisation. One of the key signalisations that we were looking at is the reconfiguration of this slip lane as you come southbound along Wentworth Avenue. At the moment, you can turn left across the pedestrian crossing with no lights, and the improvement that's proposed is that we have a left turn arrow to stop that conflict of pedestrian and vehicles. At the last meeting, there was a lot of discussion around the verges and how much space there actually is. So the image on the right, the photo is showing on Page Street. You can see we do have a large grass verge to the right. The red dotted line that you can see here, it is quite faint, but that is the property boundary, and homes are set 6 to 6.5 metres within that boundary. That allows for a 2.5 metre share path on the council verge, and it still allows up to 6 to 6.6 of grass verge remaining. You've then got your 4 lanes of Page Street, some of which are parking and some of which are traffic, and then the northern side is unchanged. That remains a 1.2 metre path. Along Wentworth Avenue, it is much tighter. We don't have a large section there. So for instance, as you can see, the property boundary in the red dotted line here, in some parts we only have 2 to 2.5 metres to curb line, and we do have existing trees and lights which we'll be dealing with. But the aim of the project is to ensure retention of trees wherever possible and trying to link up those connections that we don't currently have. So the recommendation is for Council to endorse to proceed with the Transport for New South Wales grant-funded share path component of the project. What we would like to do is commence community consultation, and then following the feedback from community consultation, we'd come back to you with an update. Thank you.
Do we have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Curry, seconded by Councillor Morrissey.
Thank you. So just in relation to this, so you just mentioned community consultation, but then the report says that we proceed with the delivery of the share path. So that obviously we need to consult the community before we tell them what is being proposed. So that means the recommendation isn't accurate.
Through the Chair, we have undertaken extensive community consultation, but we do believe with the updated drawings that we've shown, we'd like to go back out and let people know in more detail what's proposed and give them an update on the project. So we wouldn't commence construction or finalise the detailed design until that component is complete.
So when did we go out for consultation and what was the feedback? Because I don't ever remember seeing that report, because when it was raised at council last year, the feedback was because Page is such a busy street and because the houses that live along that Page street, when they're reversing and have cyclists coming and going, that was the reason, because we didn't have any consultation about that. and I thought that that was what was going to occur before this came back to us.
Through the chair, at the meeting in July, it wasn't endorsed to go to community consultation. The committee asked for more information before we go to community consultation. We did do 2 years ago. We door knocked all of the residents and discussed with them the project, but now we're seeking to go out more broadly.
So then just, can we, committee, can we then clarify that in the recommendation that, that the committee endorses, to go out for community consultation on the shared path project proposal, like one becomes irrelevant because I'm not going to endorse something to proceed if we haven't consulted with our community. That's unjust. And that, you know, so two, we can reword, they'll go out for consultation, and the slip lane is fine because that's a separate project anyway.
So are we looking at changing point 1 and point 2, Councillor Curry, to say that the committee endorses community consultation of the shared path component?
So we would delete 1,
Yep.
and we would change 2 to say that the committee endorses to proceed with undertaking community consultation on the shared path project, full stop.
Because that, and I think that the point is that the feedback from the community now, as opposed to 2 years ago with the update, that should be incorporated in the delivery, and then we go to delivery. If there might be other factors to consider, which I don't know, but what it's saying is we're going to proceed with delivery and tell them what we're doing. We should be going out to community consultation. If there is feedback, incorporating that feedback, and then go to delivery. It's sort of back to front.
So just take out timing. So because a number of houses have sold along that strip in the last 2 years, so you've not got the same residents, they're going to know nothing about it. That the committee endorses council to undertake community consultation it just says that the committee endorses to undertake, don't worry about proceeding, to undertake community consultation on the shared path project, full stop, because they mightn't even know, so it's not an update. At the committee, yep, that's fine.
My suggestion would be, Councillor Curry, that the consultation includes information on how the shared path connects to the rest of the bike network. So could we include that as an addition, the shared path project, and how it relates to the proposed
network, the bike network. Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Like those maps that are up there.
So that would just be adding to the shared path project and how it integrates with the proposed bike network. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So do we have any further discussion on that matter? I'll take it to a vote. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those against? Nay. I declare the motion carried. So now we're going to, this is Joseph Banks Park Amenities, CWA 24.039. Do we have, and Councillor Morrissey has excused himself because of his conflict of interest, which he raised earlier. So could we please have an officer's report on this?
Through the chair. Just a bit of an update in terms of the project. So we've recently completed a lot of improvements in Sir Joseph Banks Park, and we're working on some future projects which we will be bringing back to committee. But we're specifically looking today at the existing car park down at Fremlin Street, adjacent to the Adventure Play space and the new toilet block that's been proposed. So we did a lot of investigation into locations for the new toilet block. The existing block is at number 6 in this location, Adventures Play Space at number 3, the existing playground that was refurbished at number 4, and the car park number 2. Yeah. Oh no. There are a lot of existing services underground that we're having to navigate through. So the locations that we've chosen were A, the original location that we proposed, B, being the existing location, C, being on top of the mound, D, behind the playground, and E, behind the flying fox. Okay, back. So that's a montage of the building as it would have been at location A, and we did some further investigation to look at an additional viable location, which was on top of the mound, closer to the playground and away from the share path, so it wasn't a conflict. So just to give you a bit of a context of where that would be, it would be on top of this mound here, which sits between the car park and the play space. So just a couple of photos to show where that would actually be positioned. Yeah. So in plan, the toilet block would be on top of the mound with a split through the centre. It would be connected by walkways. We would need to look at some levelling of that mound to ensure that we don't have too much ramping. We don't want to end up with lots of handrails and things like that. So we want a nice gentle rise for any prams or accessibility. And that's a montage of what the facility would look like in that space. So we were asked to do some investigations. There's nothing within the ground that rules out us putting it on that mound. Well, it's like almost superimposed on itself. So the following reports have been completed: our geotech, our waste classification, and our survey, and none of those have ruled out that location. So we are proposing that even though we still have the arborist, structural engineer, and a final review of the reports, that we proceed with that location and move on with notifying residents that were part of the original consultation that the outcomes of the consultation, we've taken feedback on board, and this is the new location and we'll be proceeding. We do have approved funding of 2.88 million. That's for both the building and the car park. So the car park is having a reconfiguration to allow for accessible parking, bus drop-off. It will also have a turning area and a loading zone. And then we'll look at any ramps or stairs that we need to do in connection with the new facility. So we are flagging that those components will require some additional budget, but we will report back to you before any commencement of construction or any procurement is undertaken. So we're proposing now to update our REF and update the community, proceed with the detailed design and tender period, and come back to you with an update in the new year. That program has construction commencing in October of next year. We would try and streamline the program and wherever possible minimise impacts for summer school holidays, noting that the existing toilet will remain in place and we won't decommission that until the new facility is built. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Should we take that to a vote?
Move that way.
Move. For Councillor Curry, second, and Councillor Barlow.
Much better than what's there now.
Yeah. Is that your discussion, Councillor Barlow? Do you want to put the microphone on?
Oh no, I'm just saying I'll second it, and it's much better than what is existing at the moment.
Any further discussion?
It's getting late.
Okay, let's move the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. I declare the motion carried. We're moving on to the final item now, CWA 24040, update of the Community Cultural Centre and Chapel at Bryant Street, Rockdale. We're just bringing back in Councillor Morrissey so that he can hear the officer's report. Oh, sorry, there are confidential items. Sorry, that computer's almost dead. So we'll move into those. Thank you.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, on the back of the page. Thank you. So firstly, can we please have the officers' report for the updated Community Cultural Centre and Chapel?
Through the chair. Council resolved to purchase the 3 sites across from the Rockdale Administration Building, and the sites were acquired for public open space purposes in accordance with the Rockdale LEP and land reservation map, and those buildings are in zoned RE1 public recreation. So the existing facility on the right is the chapel building that Council has previously endorsed to be demolished. We've procured quotations for that demolition and it is at end of life. In addition, before we made that decision, we did do an investigation into the use of the building. The form of the roof structure is quite prohibitive to uses inside the centre. The steep form limits natural light and the building is not fit for purpose other than what it was as a chapel. The facility on the left was to be turned into a community cultural centre, and we have previously brought you some montages in terms of what that facility would have looked like if we were to refurbish it. And it was also to increase the open space parkland with the demolition of the chapel. So they're just some internal photos of the actual chapel that's due for demolition. We have an approved budget of $3.4 million, which is for both the demolition, the park improvements and the community cultural centre. We have seen a significant construction cost escalation since the project's inception prior to our DA submission in 2022. The escalation is in line with what we've seen across the industry for buildings, but we do feel that the $4.85 million for design approvals, demolition and refurbishment of that facility is high, and we wanted to bring that back to the council to note that if we were to proceed with the Community Cultural Centre, it would be an extra $1.4 million. This site is part of the Rockdale Spine project, and it is envisioned as open space into the future. So the recommendation that we're bringing to you tonight is that you consider both the chapel and former church hall be demolished, and that we look at building something fit for purpose within the new Rockdale, within the Rockdale Spine project. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a
Move.
Any discussion, please?
Yeah, I regret having to support this, but the community is up in arms. But I think the mural's part of it, and I think we've said that that could be replicated when the new building or whatever happens afterwards. But when you see the chapel, it's not fit for purpose, or the other building.
Yeah, I've been inside it, and that actual picture looked a lot better than it actually looks inside. It's quite dilapidated and gross. Yeah, look, I think, part of that Rockdale Spine work's going to be really important, and to have the option of creating that open space in an area there that is quite dense, I think will be really valued by the community. The little corner pocket park we've created, you see people sitting on the sandstone, the benches having lunch, so the opportunity to expand that, and then, considering a hub depending on how the bigger project comes together, which will no doubt incorporate new council offices at some stage, and a bit more of that connection to library, to cultural space, I think is a much more strategic approach to looking at this project. So thank you.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, just for me, it's rare that council in a high density area can create a park. That is super rare. We did it on Guess Avenue last council term, and we've seen that, and that's a much bigger project, admittedly. Maybe there's room for a basketball ring here somewhere, but I'll visit that at another stage. But I think when we can actually see a recommendation or something coming before councillors to become parkland, demolish something, create a parkland, we need to take those opportunities when they come. And I know there's acquisition projects and programs across which are very long term, and here's something that's actually can come to fruition. So I'm certainly supportive of the proposal. Thanks.
Any other discussion? Councillor Bretterhoof, do you have to go up to the microphone stand?
No, it's green now. Thank you, through the chair. I also agree with it's very valuable to have wonderful parkland developed in the middle of Rockdale. That's what we really need in Rockdale. However, I also know there's significant community engagement against the demolition of particularly that A-frame church. And I wonder, while I understand, and I haven't been personally in it, but I understand it's not fit for purpose, is there a creative way we can use the A-frame within the park as an art sort of, you know, something that maybe leaves just the front bit on? Like, can we satisfy the community and keep some of this important historical development from the 1950s? Maybe not yet that important, but very soon it will be. Is there another way, actually, I want to ask, to keep it rather than just demolish it all?
Through the chair, we haven't specifically looked at any retention. We have looked at photographic, historic, obviously record keeping of the building, certainly record keeping of the mosaic. To retain the structure could be problematic long term in terms of then having a fixed item that could deteriorate. So we would have to look into that as a separate item. There's other ways that we could deal with it in terms of interpretive signage, you know, historical records rather than retention of structure.
I had a couple of questions. I also reiterate the value in the green space, but also I've had quite a few community members asking about it as potential artist studio space, particularly not the chapel but the church, and if there is any possibility that in the interim before we create a fit for purpose artist facility, if there was an in-between where we could have artists, you know, council supported studio spaces for artists in residence or anything like that. I haven't actually been into that church, so I don't know what condition it is. I did go into the chapel, but yeah, I haven't been to the church.
Through the chair, we were going to suggest that any councillors who are interested in having a tour similar to what we did with the A-frame into the church, we could do that potentially before the council meeting on that Wednesday. It is in extremely poor condition. It's not fit for any purpose at the moment. It would take investment to make it safe. So I think it would be worth councillors having a look for themselves so they can visualise it when you're making a decision.
Thank you, that's very useful. Councillor Kassim.
Yes, my apologies, I haven't actually looked at the mural, but the question is, it's probably going to be a flat no, just because I don't know what it's like, but is there any possibility of rescuing it in any way as part of the, demolition and then reusing it, replacing it somewhere, you know, even on the ground or something like this? Integrating it into,
we have looked at options for reuse of mosaic tiles in surfaces, definitely. It is depicting a religious scene, so to replicate it in its current status may not suit the broader park, but certainly we can look at how it can be utilised in pavement surfaces.
Yeah, okay.
There is some beautiful timber as well in the structure that could also be potentially retained and recycled, like as Councillor Bretterhoof suggested, you know, maybe holding on to some of the assets that were there and recycling them and repurposing in the space might be a nice nod to the history of the space. I have one other question. It's just around community consultation. We went out to community consultation for the church to be turned into a creative hub, and it was very well received. And now we're being asked to change the recommendation without having gone to any community consultation. And my concern is, as councillors who are on the front line of our community, that we get the pushback and we haven't taken them on a journey with us about why we're making this decision or what is the bigger arc here towards a spine. I know I did reach out to the General Manager this week about it, and there was talk in council around 2011, 2012, but that's a long time. I certainly wasn't even a resident of Rockdale at that stage. So I just wonder if we're missing a step here. I wonder also when the demolition is slated, and if there is time to do some sort of community outreach to explain the change, so that we're not saying, on the one hand, community, tell us what you want. Oh, you really want this? Too bad, we're demolishing it.
Through the chair, that certainly is not the intent of the story.
Yeah.
The work on the Rockdale spine, which has largely, as you're right, been happening internally within council rather than doing it, there hasn't been a lot of reporting to the community. We're ready to come back to councillors with that work, and we're proposing to do that probably in February next year. And that's a large piece of work, and it's going to take a number of sessions with councillors to really work through. The last time council considered it was almost 12 months ago, I think, when you looked at a number of options and decided on your preferred model that you wanted us to go away and do some work on. I think perhaps one of the things that hasn't been fully explained to the community yet is councillors have an obligation to consider value for money. And as we saw this project becoming more and more expensive, I remember when we said to you, it's about $1 million. And then we said it's about $2 million. And now we're saying it's over $4 million. It really did need, pause and think about, is that value for money for a building of that footprint, with the limitations that comes with adapting a building that wasn't built for that purpose. So I think we can do a lot about the Rockdale spine starting early next year. And I think the discussions with the community who's really, invested in seeing a cultural centre, I think there's going to be lots of opportunities for them to be involved in planning for that and seeing that come to fruition.
And so when is the demolition for this site proposed to be?
Through the chair, as we've only got approval to date for the chapel, there is no date scheduled as yet for the church demolition. If council resolves, we would then need to procure for that, and it wouldn't happen until the new year, which gives us ample time to talk to the community and with all of the councillors.
So is it possible that we can add an amendment that the council, that the community that there be community education around the decision, or is it community engagement? Where are we at with it? Community engagement about the decision to increase the green space and to invest in a more long-term arts and culture centre.
In conjunction with the work that we're doing with the Green Spine.
Yeah.
Not necessarily on this site. It's not going to be on this site, so we'll leave to the comms.
Yeah, it's within the spine, within the development of
Yeah.
the structures within the spine.
So can I just clarify, because the intent is to proceed to demolish, but it says we're considering it. So why don't, if everyone's in agreement, the council endorse the demolition, not consider, we just, and that'll kick it off, because in terms of the education, it's been endorsed. There's no the consideration's been had.
Yeah.
Just for transparency from the outset, not to be seemingly playing games.
Point one.
So it's point one.
Still trying to finish point.
Oh, sorry.
That in that council proceed with community education, I think was the beginning of it, rather than community engagement.
Education.
That council proceed with community education.
And just maybe in line with that, to add in a time frame in one, so it says that endorse the demolition following community education.
Okay. Yeah, the council proceed.
I might consider those as the mover.
Okay, sorry.
So would you accept as the mover?
Would you accept as the mover these amendments?
Maybe.
Maybe.
See what they look like.
When we get there.
That council endorses demolition following community education. So you can take the
Sorry.
I think
Endorse demolition is point one.
yeah, I think we've mixed
Don't
it up.
don't put.
We can't see one, we're changing one. We're changing one actually, no one.
I think they were trying to get number 3 right, and then we could go back to 1. But
Do three.
yeah, so I think it's just that council endorses the council proceeds with community education. And then you can just with community education regarding the increase of green space within the spine and the long-term plans
No, not green space within the spine.
within the Rockdale
The
spine.
council proceeds with community education regarding.
On the reasons behind the decision to demolish the house.
And the long-term plans within the arts, for an arts and culture, long-term plans for an arts and culture centre. And an arts and culture centre. Yeah, are you happy with that? And then we also changed number 1.
So endorse rather than
Council
consider.
endorsed demolition.
Just change consider to endorse. That's it. Just show me 3 again. Council proceeds with community education regarding the increase of green space within the Rockdale spine and the long-term plan for an art and culture centre.
The community education should be 2, not 3.
Regarding the demolition.
I would just say that council proceeds with community education regarding points 1 and 2.
Yes.
Okay.
I
That's it.
agree, I agree.
Comms know what they're doing.
Okay. Are we happy with that as a committee? Yep. Yep. Okay, so if there's no further discussion, can we move that to a vote? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. I declare the motion carried. We now have to move into 2 confidential reports before us for consideration. Councillors, would you like to move into a closed session to discuss the reports, or would you like to consider the officer's recommendation in an open session, bearing in mind any comments from the report officer and councillors would be limited to those for an open session report?
I'll move that.
Second.
So you're going to move to keep it in open session?
No, move to close.
Move to close it. So we'll move to close it. So moved by Councillor Morrissey and seconded by Councillor Curry. Thank you. Now that the closed session meeting has finished, I move that the meeting resumes into open session of committee. Is there a seconder? Councillor Morrissey. Let me know if we're back on. Okay. We will now vote on the resumption of the open committee. Are there any councillors voting against? Nay, no. I will therefore take it that you're voting in favour unless you indicate otherwise now by saying against. I declare the motion carried. I'm now to announce the recommendations carried in the closed report, which were for as published. Thank you, as published. There being no further items, I declare the meeting closed at 7 minutes past 10. Thank you. It's a bit hot in here, isn't it? Are we having a hot flush or is it? It's great.